I'm Rowena Hicks, and I hope you join me today to look at where breakdown links with vulnerability and courage, and why vulnerability and courage are so linked with the overwhelm that we feel, both in school and out, actually, home and work. And what is so important about confronting vulnerability and why there's a link there to courage. So I want to tell you a little bit about me. I have had a really tough week because I had surgery on my hand to take a couple of bones out, and it has laid me out really, because with one hand there's a lot you can't do, and when you're in pain you don't sleep very well, and then everything becomes more difficult. The result of that is that I have had to depend on other people, and that isn't great for someone who's quite a control freak and likes to be quite independent. And to top that up, I've been trying to move house now for 9 months following my divorce, and it's not going to plan. So I thought I was moving this week. I had lots of friends ready to help me move because I'm one-handed, and it hasn't happened. So I'm feeling very uncomfortable. And as a result, I've had to become vulnerable with people to say to them, I need help. Now, what has that done? So having been a teacher for many years, I think I'm probably a rescuer, and I like to have control over my day. And I know in school you can't have a lot of control, but there are a few things you can have control over. Well, in the position I'm in, there's very little control. And I like to be the one who says, no, I'm fine, let me help you. And this time I've had to reach out to people and say, please, could you help me? Now, the result of that has been that the vast majority of people have seemed delighted and helped me out so much, and even gone the extra mile for me. And that has built some beautiful new relationships, actually, and real trust in some relationships to a higher level, I would say. I want to be honest and say to you that that hasn't always been the case in the last 3 or 4 weeks since my surgery. I was let down by somebody after I went to them and was vulnerable about what I needed. And there's a risk in vulnerability, okay? There's a risk there to tell someone that you're not perfect, you have imperfections, you have needs, you're not quite coping. And this person didn't respond how I was hoping, and that hurt. But actually, the vast majority was amazing and has created a bit of a team around me, actually. It's really interesting. So I suppose that's where I'm coming from today. And I want to talk a little bit about vulnerability and courage and how that impacts our breakdown or our overwhelm. So when I had a breakdown, I don't know if it was 8 to 10 years ago, something like that. And I was off school for quite a long time. I was on very strong painkillers and could do very little for myself. And I was so ashamed that I didn't tell a lot of people. And actually, I did sort of very gently reach out to a few people, and a couple did a little bit to help me out, but not very much, if I'm honest. And it was a time of anguish and guilt and shame. Really, really difficult. Now, why didn't I reach out to more people and say, could you do some shopping for me? Or is it possible for you to do a meal for me? Things like that. It was my pride, I think. I didn't want to admit to people that I felt like a failure, because that's what it feels like when we're off sick. I think especially as teachers, when we're off, we know we're letting the team down, don't we? But man, we don't heal if we have that guilt and that shame, because you can't rest, you can't relax, you can't unwind and let your body and your mind get that new space that it needs to be able to heal. And I think teachers are really bad at this. I was told this week that someone I used to work with, I knew she was struggling, and she did come and see me one day, and she was in tears, and she just said, Rowena, I don't know what to do because I'm not coping. And I was so glad she came to speak to me, and we put some things in place to help her out. But what someone said to me last week was that this person, this teacher, came to her first and just said, I'm too scared to go and see my line manager because I don't think she'll understand. Too scared of her. And then thankfully, this person persuaded the teacher to come to me. I think I was deputy at the time, assistant head, I'm not sure. Well, what message are we giving to our colleagues in school? Are we listening to them? Are we watching out for them? Because this whole thing goes two ways. Because if we're vulnerable with others, then they have almost permission to be vulnerable with us. If you're the one who's really overwhelmed right now, what might be the impact on that safe person? Because we're better together, aren't we? But we do need to build trust, and building trust and connection requires vulnerability, which is risky. It takes courage. Let me tell you about a story when I lived in Poland, and in the winter it got really cold. We think it gets cold here in the UK, but it doesn't really. And I was in a new build, and it was quite a small school all through primary, secondary. And I was in one of the outside buildings. It was sort of like a temporary mod. And me and my class used to get really cold. We had a lot of fun with it, doing a lot of exercise and stomping around in the snow, declaring that we weren't going to freeze and all this sort of thing. It was all great fun. But I started to get really cold and started to get a bit sick, actually, because the classroom wasn't warm enough. The children were much more resilient than me. And one day I just said to one of I think it was secondary teacher, actually, I'm getting really cold and I don't quite know what to do. And he thought for a minute and he said, well, how about I take this lesson for you and you come and take my class? Now, I had a primary class of, I think, 8-9-year-olds, and his was a GCSE class. So I went over to do GCSE maths, slightly out of my comfort zone, but I did maths at uni, so that's all right. I had to learn some stuff quick. And he came over and took my class for me. And then once we did that, there were things that I could help him with. And then other teachers started clocking what we were doing. And we started as a team to share jobs, who was going to do outside playtime and who was going to do perhaps the inside lunch duty or all that sort of thing. And we worked out, because some people prefer to be outside, right? And we started to share, we started to be more honest. But what it took to start that off, it became a bit of a cycle, like a snowball down a hill. It was great, but it took me to be vulnerable. And I risked rejection at that point. Someone to say, well, look, it's your job. You've got to get on with it. And we hear that a lot in school, don't we? Toughen up. That's your job. But actually, what builds a really effective team? And I would suggest that vulnerability is key, which takes courage. There's a risk element, but then that builds connection. And that's the most effective team. So I think I've talked about it before, but an amazing training that I do with staff, whole staff if possible, is looking at your strengths and the strengths of your team. And if you can write down your most valued strengths, and then if you can share with your team what you value in them, which core competencies you value in them, it is incredibly empowering. And people will be so encouraged to hear what you appreciate about them. Because in school, we run around so fast, don't we? And it's nonstop from the minute you walk into the door to the minute you leave. We don't stop to say to someone, wow, what you did today, or what I appreciate about you is amazing. Because I wonder how many of us in school go round, and actually in life, go round as if we're unseen. That teacher I met, the secondary teacher who said to me, I haven't spoken to another adult all day, had been in his lab. Or the primary school teacher who is so overwhelmed and struggling that they stay in their classroom all day, don't leave apart from, comfort break, but they don't leave because they're afraid they might be asked to do something more, or they might be criticized, because that's all you think about when you're struggling. We need community in school. We need team. But that starts with vulnerability. So this time when I burnt out, and on this podcast and on my posts and in my book, I've written about it, I'm being honest about it. Yeah, there's an element of shame and guilt attached to it. But do you know what? This is real life. And if we're not honest with each other, how can we help each other? I've had so much help to be a better person, to make better choices. I'm a workaholic, but I'm changing. I'm learning. I'm a people pleaser, but I'm putting in boundaries. It's really hard work, but I'm getting there. I have learned from some incredible leaders, teaching assistants, teachers, admin staff, and people in business all over the place. Parents have taught me, and every day I'm learning. If we stop learning and being teachable, we are so stuffed. We all need to be teachable. You may feel you've got it all sussed. I promise you haven't. However successful or competent you are, we all need to keep learning. So I hope today this encourages you to be a listener for those around you, and also to be brave, to be courageous, to be imperfect, be vulnerable with those around you, to say, actually, I might need a little bit of help. It's very, very, you know how we love to help others, don't we? Well, go to someone and say you're not okay and see what the response is. I hope you do. I really hope you do. This week it's been staring me in the face, how I need to be vulnerable, but it's courageous to do it. But sometimes it takes a bit of a drama or a trauma or a challenge for us to really confront this. Maybe go to someone today, say if you're not coping, or if you know there's someone around you who might need you, go approach them, see what happens. Be a listening ear. Who knows? Thanks for listening. I hope you took something of value from today. If you want to connect, I'm at rowenahicks.com, or I have a Facebook group, which is Preventing Teacher Burnout. So I look forward to connecting to you at one of those.